Good day, everybody. So today we're going to speak about some mental health myths, and I have psychologist Johan van der Hoogte with me today. He's going to tell you a bit more about himself, but today I'm going to ask him some questions about mental health myths. What are some myths out there about mental health? But mainly we're going to focus on how we can handle them and how we can deal with them. Johan, welcome. Thank you so much for speaking to me today.
Thank you, Albert. It's good to see you.
Can you tell people a bit about yourself or what you do, your line of work?
Yeah, sure. So at the moment, I'm working at the Veteran Psychiatric Hospital in Potch. And we see a variety of people. We are a team of about 10 psychologists. The ward I'm working at the moment is adult men. And it's a ward which includes mostly mood disorders and psychotic disorders, but we have a variety of different people that we see. And then before Veteran, I worked at Bheki Mlangeni Hospital in Soweto. And then before that, I worked at Weskopie Psychiatric Hospital in Pretoria. So yeah, I'm really glad about the experience I was able to get so far, and I hope from that there'll be something valuable to add today to this conversation.
No, definitely. It really sounds like you've been through it all. Just to give people some background of how we know each other, Johan and I used to study together at the University of, almost at the University of Psychology, the University of the Free State, psychology department, but you know, Johannes gone. I remember I had a conversation with you because of one of the series that I did on the dark triad and the dark personalities. And I phoned you and I think we haven't seen each other for like 3 years. And I phoned him out of the blue and I asked him to look at my material. And then some of the things that you said actually on that day, like inspired me so much to do the interview with you today, because, you know, some of the things you just naturally said was like, you know, really people need to hear this. And it was based on that conversation that we decided to call this interview Mental Health Myths. So I'm going to start this out, Johan. What are some common mental health myths today? And when I ask the question, I mean from your perspective, what you see in your line of work.
Yeah, sure. I think there are many myths out there, but from my point of view, in my context, what I get to do with, I think I'd like to view it from different what can I call it, levels. So there are myths on a personal level, myths from families, and then from community, society as a whole. And all of them have an impact on a person seeking mental health care, but also on the whole community. But I think to start off with, one thing I think that strikes me most on can I say most deeply emotionally is myths from families, because that's, I think, one thing I can see personally that has a really significant impact on people that we see and get to do with. And it's almost it's as soon as a person has or is seeking treatment for mental illness, it's almost like that person becomes a scapegoat in a family, that now this person with this problem, either this depression or this psychosis, this addiction, this is the main problem in our family. This is the thing that holds us back as a family. It brings a divide almost between this is where we could be as a family, this is how good we can function, but now because of this person, this is the reason for all of our struggles. And it's a really, really massive burden to carry as a person, and you can see then why I don't want to accept needing help or having a mental illness, because I'm the main problem in my family. Yeah, if I can just look, I have some other notes about that. Maybe I can give an example or two. You know, I just have to be careful not to overshare on detail. Yeah, no, op die spot now I'm struggling to get to a specific example.
Can I ask you something? Can I ask you
sure.
something based on what you said, just for the people out there? And this doesn't have to be anything specific, but maybe just in general. How would you advise families to handle a situation like that differently? If you can say, like, this is like you've explained a bit about how families do deal with people who have mental health issues. What advice would you give to families who have somebody like that in their family?
Right. Okay. I'll get to answer that. Let me just share also what I forgot came to mind now. It stays with me when sitting with a person and a family. If the family gets a chance to talk, you can almost feel that sense of pressure when loved ones start to explain, this is what's wrong about our loved one. These are all the things they're doing wrong. The temper is out of control. They're lying to us, and the things are not untrue, but you can just feel how this person becomes completely a villain. It's a barrier between that person's ability to experience any type of acceptance or support or love in that family. And this is significant because it towards the psychological needs that's actually needed for that person to grow and to heal and to function more, what's the word I'm looking for now, more successfully in the context. And it goes from a resentment almost to blame, and even in Afrikaans the word afguns. I don't know what's the English word for that now, but maybe resentment is the right word for that. But for me, what I could see, what families can do, and what sometimes happen if a family actually spends sufficient time, a member or two, to join a person seeking treatment in a couple of sessions, to actually understand more about that person's needs, specifically emotional experience, but also needs. Because at the core, especially through my view, is at the core of many mental illnesses, we have thwarting of important psychological needs. So if they can sit in a session and see this is actually the experience of our loved one, they've been feeling isolated or alone, or based on our interactions as a family, they're always inadequate, they're always not good enough. And when they can actually see that experience and start to develop a sense of empathy, and reduce a blaming stance, the more accepting they can become, the more they're able to join each other with emotional closeness, and that allows the person to not be as defensive in relation to them. But I know that's very context specific. Everyone cannot, in a family, go attend joint sessions. Families are far away, and not all hospitals actually allow for that or have capacity for that. And the other suggestion would be to find out more, as much as you can, about the person's experience. But the challenge of that is reading up on mental illness is also dangerous, because it gives a general description for someone who has a very individual experience of it. So I think instead of saying, let me read up and understand what you're going through, understand your diagnosis, understand your mental illness through someone else's perspective, is actually to learn by myself more how to listen to you in a way that I understand your experience personally of this mental illness or of this diagnosis, and actually understand what are your challenges, what are your hopes. And the more I can understand you, the more it brings us emotionally closer.
What I hear you say is, and correct me if I'm going off of what you are saying, but what I hear is that something like empathy will play an important role, because empathy is kind of like putting yourself in that person's skin, like trying to feel what that person feels. And another thing that I'm hearing is self-awareness. I'm aware of where I am, I'm aware of where you are, rather than just, and I think I can ask this as well, do you believe that it happens sometimes where people don't want to deal with their own things and they just blame it on the other person that has mental health issues?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. As far as you're the problem for the conflict in my marriage or in my family, then there's no problem with me, or there's nothing I need to change, no challenge. It's much more easier, and it's actually a path of less resistance for my mind, for my brain to see the fault in you. And now it makes it much more difficult if the patient has a diagnosis. Now it's almost an automatic blame because there's the evidence for the for the problems we face. So I don't need to look at myself. It almost takes responsibility off me as the family member to go and see what is my influence here. And the influence is, I mean, there is a lot of academic backing on mental problems that exist on the basis of the whole family and not an individual. There's a lot written about the contributions. So much so that in the past, when one patient has schizophrenia, they were treated by hospitalizing the whole family for weeks and treating the family. Obviously it's not practical, but it's a reality that we build our personalities, our psyches, based on our experience in our family. So it's going to have the most influence in developing my psychological issues and problems, which all of us has. Only some of us has it on a clinical level that actually, maybe gets admitted to hospital for. But what you said based on empathy and self-awareness, it's absolutely valid. And empathy is one of those difficult concepts where we tend to overestimate how much empathy we actually have for people. Most of us tend to think, yeah, I'm quite empathic, but still I understand through my own perspective. It took me many years of training, and I'm still on that process of understanding what empathy is, because it looks a bit different with every individual. But we know what happens when I can actually communicate and express empathy. If someone goes from being more defensive to being more open to share, to being more open to explore different parts of my experience. So, I would say to learn more about empathy in the context of this person that I'm sitting with and what their challenges are. And I would know if I'm being empathic if the person feels more safe and shares more and does not just defend themselves in a conversation. That makes sense.
I was speaking to a psychologist here in Bloemfontein that I'm quite close to. His name is Dr. Obas Jooste. And I once made a statement, and I thought it was a very clever statement. I said to him, if you go through something, then you can help other people better who are going through it because you went through it. So I thought it was quite a good, clever statement. And he said to me, no, you are wrong. And I said to him, why am I wrong? He's like, it's not going through something that helps you to help other people. It's empathy that helps you to help other people. You get people that's like, yeah, I've been through it. It's not that bad. And, or just get over, a lot of people experience it. So you went through it, but you still don't have empathy. And then on the other hand, you can get somebody who didn't go through what you were going through, and they can still have empathy. So I think it's a very good thing that you are saying, like, empathy is not an easy thing, and we shouldn't overestimate the level of empathy that we do have. I really love that.
I think there are some markers of that you can use on empathy. And one thing is, if you look at a conversation, the more I speak as the listener, the longer my sentences, and especially the more questions I ask and the more advice I give, it's almost like the less empathy. Empathy is more how I actually share of what I can feel you are feeling. So it's more of a short statement. It's not a book of advice. It's just I base it on, there's an approach called motivational interviewing. Don't know if you've heard about that. The name is a bit misleading. It's almost like a therapeutic approach, but they focus a lot on what I say, what does it cause in the person I'm talking to? And they show that for for emotional closeness, you need at least 2 to 3 statements of sharing how I understand what you are saying for every one question that you ask. And that can allow sufficient understanding and empathy for the person to actually experience it. So you can see how difficult that is, even for a clinical context where one is forced to ask a lot of questions, to actually have enough empathy for it to have an effect.
So this takes time and patience, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that you mentioned, self-awareness, because I need to see where am I actually not being empathic enough? Where am I going into an advice-giving role or into asking too much questions role? Yeah.
There's a guy called Bob Proctor, and he said, and I want to hear what you say about this, what you have to say about this. He said, we don't listen with our ears, we listen through our ears, but we listen with our perspective. Do you think this is valid in a context like this?
Absolutely, and it makes sense to me that I can only understand you as far as I have a frame of reference, or I can only understand you through my own understanding of the world, with my own concepts, with my own schemas. It can never be 100% what you are saying to me. So there's a lot of filters. Even if we use the same words, it will have a different meaning to me compared to you. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I wanna ask this question. I cannot remember. I know we studied together and we had a lot of subjects together. Did you ever study anthropology or not? Did you have it as a subject?
No.
Okay. Now, because the reason I ask is because we learned about the development of different culture and different social groups and different religious groups. So I want to ask about, do you see that playing a role whatsoever, like social groups, cultural groups, religious groups? What kind of role does that play in mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from all cultures, no culture can be excluded, but all cultures have their own almost view of mental illness, and that's both on the explicit and implicit level. I think today if I don't know to call it the Western or the more social culture advocates a lot of acceptance for being open about mental illness, talking about it, and I think which is a very constructive thing, but it can also make us miss the biases we still have, every one of us individually as well. If I can apply it to myself. If I have to go to a mental hospital to be admitted as a patient, I will still have a resistance to do that, even though I know what the context is about. And yes, it has an influence on the broader culture. I don't know if I should go into specifics. I think all of us have quite we will be able to estimate or to guess what it is, whether it is, you're not as strong as the rest of your family or your community. It's because you are somehow emotionally or psychologically weak that you need extra help or extra support, even though in the way that is phrased, help or support. Or it can be that you didn't follow your tradition or your community's cultural beliefs enough, and that's why you were cursed, or you have this setback that you cannot gain success because you didn't follow these practices, or someone cursed you, did something bad towards someone else, and you're being punished. It's I think no one can be excluded of that. I don't know if you want to maybe talk about some specific ones regarding that.
Yeah, I think I like it when not like it, but I do agree with or I have a strong connection to the word curse that you are using, because I think that's what a lot of people would think. I'm cursed, or I'm possessed, or I think that's some of the myths out there. Or in a religious sense, some people can say, but if you have mental health issues, you don't have enough faith. And I think that's a lot of myths that I deal with. If I have to see people that struggle with some things in the mental health area, I hear a lot of stuff that people say, am I cursed? Am I possessed? Is my faith not strong enough? Is my belief system not strong enough? And I think those are total myths, and I actually believe it puts people in greater bondage. And it doesn't free them. So from my perspective, those are some of the things that I've seen. And I've seen in my life, if I just open up to people to how I feel sometimes, and I can say to people, listen, the way you feel right now is, I feel like that sometimes, and I think everybody feels like that sometimes. And if somebody told me that I was cursed and I was possessed and I don't have enough faith, and I believed it, then maybe I would have felt like this for a longer period of time. That's what I would say is my experience with it.
Absolutely, and it makes sense because we make sense of something like mental illness based on our framework of how we understand the world at this moment. So if I will understand it through my culture's what's the word I'm looking for now? My culture's understanding, or my church's understanding. If that's my main frame of reference, until I get to learn another frame of reference, which will see a different cause, which will take into account, you have your genetics and you have your forming period as you grow up as a child, and then you have so many various situational factors that all of them can contribute to how mental illness starts or develops. And let me not go down that path. What I mean is it will affect everyone, whether or not it develops into a clinical mental illness level or not. There's another thing in the back of my mind I wanted to say regarding that. What was it now? We spoke about the church or community's influence. Just about the factors that can actually cause and develop mental illness, but through a psychologist's perspective now. It's based on your attachment, your early relationship with your family or with whatever significant relationships at that time. And that's something that seemed quite strange to me before I learned further in psychology. I thought, how can your experience as a baby form so much who you are now? And then does it actually take a lot of control, a lot of responsibility away from us now? But it's in the time that the brain forms and develops that I learned, who am I in relation to someone else? And there's a lot of explanation and theoretical backing of how different personality disorders develop based on just that early period, even before 3 years of age, on my personality, who I become. But in addition to that, factors such as substances, drugs, there's so much that affect what my experience is and how that can develop into a clinical mental illness. And it's actually, I almost want to give a sense of understanding, we can become very critical of a community or a church, but it's actually a way to understand, of course, I'm going to view mental illness that way, this is my frame of reference, and I'm also going to try and fix it that way. But now we also have to be honest that many times it does work. We've been taught actually in our training to be open to the traditional African view, because in many cases the treatment works. The person gets better. Same with church and ways in which certain illnesses are dealt with. It just brings the danger that now people want to apply it into every case, whereas in many cases it does need the help of a psychiatrist or a psychologist.
So for me, if I could just give you my perspective, you know me well enough to know this. You know I'm a Christian, and I remember you attended some of my Christian groups that time when I had them. So what I always tell people is I believe God as created many things for us to get better. And people might get better through different things, you know. So I believe you should use prayer. I believe you can use your religious community. I believe you can use the psychologist. I believe you can even use the medicine if it's prescribed correctly. And I believe you're not, you know, if God heals you, He doesn't necessarily just use one of those aspects. He can use many different aspects. That's my point of view from where I stand.
No, absolutely. And we actually sometimes need to elaborate on almost that same point of view when we work with someone who is so, how can I say, so focused on a religious perspective that it's actually difficult for me to accept that I can take medication or that I can see a psychologist for an extended period of time. And then it helps to integrate, because it doesn't mean if there's a psychologist, a psychological perspective, it doesn't mean that the other perspective, the church's perspective or the religious perspective is wrong. They can coexist. And it's necessary for them to coexist. You don't have to leave the one, and it doesn't have to be wrong in order to allow yourself to use the other one.
There's a scripture that I'm thinking of now. And I use this a lot to explain to people. It's in Romans 8:28, and it says, "All things work together for the good." And to those who love God and are called according to His purpose. So I say to people, God sometimes uses different things holistically together to bring you towards a good place. And I do believe if we can see, if people can just be open more to see a holistic picture, then I think a lot of these myths will be debunked and a lot of things can be used. And my following question would have, is, and I think we've been speaking about it, is how does these myths, or does these myths cause people not to seek professional help?
Absolutely. Can I come back to the question? I just want to comment on what you mentioned now about holistic view. There is a drawback to having a classification for mental illness, to having the DSM manual, which gives us all the criteria and all the terms to name various different mental illnesses. You know, okay, it does give us the language and it gives us patterns to see certain elements, certain behavior, which can then be treated. But as far as it describes, it reduces even more than it describes. If you apply a diagnosis to a person, then automatically that's what we see in the person's life. We see the depressed mood, we see the low energy, we see the worthlessness, hopelessness, and that limits us to, that's all that we see about that person. And it's almost like now we have to reduce that as much as we can. That's the best that this person can function. And even in the field of psychology and medicine, there's been a large counter to this view, in that we cannot see a whole person just based on deficit or just based on criteria of a mental illness. Because even that criteria, it exists in many cases for very small periods of time. It's not like a person is depressed for their whole life or a person is psychotic for their whole life. It's actually episodes, especially when it's managed well. It's for brief parts. But we miss the whole character of the person, everything else in strengths and how a person actually deals with additional challenges compared to someone who doesn't have a mental illness. In psychology specifically, there are approaches that fall under the postmodern view that says we're not going to have this illness view of people. Let's view someone more holistically. Let's view them in terms of the times that they are strong and cope well, or what they actually do to achieve that with their specific challenges. Let's see the person and not the illness. And that's actually it's a massive challenge. It sounds simplistic to say it like that, but even as a family, we spoke about family earlier. The challenge for me is to still see the person. I can say apart from the illness, or even in addition to the illness and the symptoms of the illness. That's needed, because otherwise we miss so much, and it's also actually potential for functioning more effectively and growing by seeing those parts, acknowledging them, and helping to support and to grow them. I hope I explained now enough for that to make sense. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, I want to ask you something, but I want to tell you what I hear. What I hear is like, your diagnosis is not your identity. It's your diagnosis. And don't make it your identity. And this is what I want to ask, because this is what I normally tell people when I sit with them. I always say to them, be careful for your I am statements, and rather use I feel statements or I experience statements. So instead of saying I am depressed, say I feel depressed, or I experience the symptoms of depression. And it's more like it's important to acknowledge that it's there, but I also say to people, don't make it as part of your whole identity, in the sense of like, now this is who I am, and that is all that is true. I would love to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense, and it's I like the way of seeing it or explaining it like that, because if depression becomes my identity, and sure, it can become part of my identity, but then I'll completely miss who am I apart from depression. It's like it then reduces or limits the potential for my identity, for what I can be. So yes, it's absolutely necessary to, and it's actually, I think it's especially necessary in the case of mental illness, that I need to know who am I, my whole character and personality apart from this. Yes, it can come and affect me, especially from time to time. But it can go both ways. It can, for someone to accept an identity like that, I can limit myself in that. I can take that description, that label, and now it's all that I see. When I look into my past, all my future, when I look at my relationships, I can only be the depressed person. And I don't want to say it in a way that this what's the word I'm looking for? Now my English is running out, eh? Now Afrikaans is gone as well. And this, maybe it'll come back later. Disaffirms is not a word, but I think maybe it'll come back later.
But I do like what you say, because I always say to people, you do want to acknowledge. If you cannot acknowledge something is there, you cannot deal with it. So I think with the diagnosis, it's very important to acknowledge it. But I almost like it's almost like when you have a flu, and I'm not comparing the two or anything. I'm just using this as an example. Nobody says I am flu. People say, I have a flu. I've been diagnosed with this, and I can deal with this, and I can fight this off. But I didn't make it part of my identity. But also, I think the whole idea of like not denying that it's there, like if you are in denial, it's also like I think it brings you to that place where you cannot deal with things, or where you won't deal with things.
Absolutely, and that's the other side of, or the other direction it can take, is denying it completely, which is sometimes taught. It's sometimes I don't know if the word is the uneducated way of looking at that mental illness. Don't speak it. Just don't over exaggerate it. Speak life, not illness. And I don't think the intention is a wrong intention, but the impact is that now I don't allow myself to actually learn enough about what this is and how to deal with it, and to allow myself the best possible life I'm capable of having with this, if I deny it.
I want to hear this based on what you just said. I had a video once, and it's quite a long time ago that I did this, but I think it fits in so well. I did a video on toxic positivity, and it was a while ago. And what I said is, you just use positive thoughts and positive affirmation over things that you don't want to deal with. Do you believe that connects to what you are saying now?
Absolutely. I like that term, toxic positivity, because it can, and many times it is an effective way of coping, but not all times. We have to see the limit to it and the drawback as well. As a human, we are capable of many different experiences, many different emotions. And why would we limit ourselves to only one? There's a reason for my frustration or for my sorrow, or even for my hopelessness sometimes. There's a need, there's something that it wants to communicate with to me. And if I can understand that allows me to move in a direction that fits with who I am and what my whole being, my values actually want. And if I ignore so many parts, then I actually function from a very small part of myself. And I want to draw all of my energy, all of my motivation, all of my life from a very limited part, and keep my other parts further away, which is not sustainable, I can say that.
I love what you say about sustainability, because I do believe in anything we do, we want to go for a very long time. We want to go a long way. And I really do love the holistic approach you are taking. I think that's very, very important, because I think a lot of times people, they just want to go in one direction. I'm either this or I'm this. I either have a mental health issue or I don't. It's either I pray about it or I take a medication for it, or I go see this person or I go see this person. It's one or the other. And I have to say, I really love the holistic approach that you are taking, and I believe also that's something that makes you very good in what you are doing. So thank you very much for that, and I think your explanation was so well.
Thank you. Yeah, there's so much on that holistic approach, and it allows us to understand so much more. Because if I view mental illness as it's them, it's there, it's someone else, it's all is wrong with them, everything is fine with me. It's unfortunately it's a danger, and it's how a lot of us do it, how a lot of us view other people. Whereas it's actually all of us has a little bit of depression sometimes, or a little bit of mania. All of us have some stress sometimes. All of us have a personality. Where you get the disorder on a clinical level, you can get personality traits, which is subclinical, but it still affects your life. And then underneath traits, you have personality structure that every one of us have. You cannot be excluded from that. Otherwise, you're a robot. And even that is a type of personality.
I want to say one last thing before I get to the final question. I know we like enjoying talking so much now. There's this guy, and this guy's probably, as a Christian, he is the preacher that I listen to the most. His name is Judah Smith, and I listened to him something on Sunday. He's from America, and he had this message called I Am Them. That was the title of his message, I Am Them. And he was speaking about this idea where Jesus hung on the cross and he said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And he says when we're reading that, we always think of them as, those bad people who did that, and not realizing when Jesus said, Father, forgive them, I'm part of the them that needs to be forgiven. And for me, that was like amazing to say, listen, but sometimes I am part of the them, and I cannot just exclude myself and act as if I'm this person that's always healthy, always have everything figured out, and then we get the they. If there's a problem, it's always them. So that's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that.
All right, no, and it's absolutely relevant. It's always relevant. It's less energy for the mind, for the brain to see the wrong in someone else, but that's something I had to actually learn as part of my journey of becoming a psychologist. We had to learn to see these things in ourselves before we could see it and diagnose it in others. It's actually, and I think it's part of what we can do as individuals to understand mental illness more and to reduce the stigma attached to it, is to see what is actually, how does sorrow or a depressed mood feature in my life, or what's my personality structure? I had to give myself a personality diagnosis. That's actually what we had to do in some interviews for selection. And I need to be able to see that in myself in order to understand it and have empathy with that in someone else. Yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail into personality. I can get a bit carried away when we come to that. But if I can just say quickly, all of us have a personality, which you can see in different, from different levels or perspectives, but at the core, which is attached to worth. To worth, what is it that I do that gives me a sense of worth? So for some personalities, it's when I can achieve, when I can feel good because my worth is attached to achievement. For others, it's when I feel emotionally close, when someone is taking care of me, or when I feel someone really invests in me, that's when I feel worth. And that's something that it benefits each of us to know that, because that affects how I relate with everyone around me in almost all situations. Is what gives me worth.
I want to say this final thing, and I just say these things because I want to hear your response. So I was watching, and sometimes when I, like in natural circumstances in life, something happens and I get this idea. So I don't watch Formula One, but I have a friend that's a big fan of Formula One, and he once invited me to come watch this Formula One race. And so I watched, and so he was supporting this one guy. I couldn't remember who it was, and then all of a sudden the car stopped, and the people came and they changed the tires, and they did some things to the car, and then they, like, I don't know if you watch Formula One. If you do, you will know more about this. But so the car just drove again, and I was like, but doesn't it slow him down when he stops? And he says, no, it actually, that pit stop actually makes them much faster if they can change some tires and do some things. And I had this idea, like, we should do that. Because in life, we always like, we're going, we're striving, we're trying. And those pit stops and just go and re-evaluate yourself, I think is a very important thing.
Absolutely. It takes you out of the race. What's the word I'm looking for now? The focus, the race mindset, into a place where I can actually self-evaluate, which gives me other resources to continue with. I like that metaphor.
Thank you. I came up with it while I was watching Formula One. Johan, this was amazing. Thank you so much. I want to ask, are there any last things you want to say to the people? Any last thoughts?
Well, if you have a few more minutes, I thought we could maybe look at a few different disorders and some myths attached to them specifically. See what comes out. Okay, I don't have a list. I thought about the idea because it can be useful. But if we take a mood disorder, something like depression, I think there's a lot of myths, and it can come through quite harshly, quite critically, especially if there's a limited empathy, a lazy person or unmotivated or oversensitive. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if there are any. I'm sure more people can add more, but just on a physiological level, there's so much that changes in a depressive episode, it is actually the person functions in a state of what's the word I'm looking for now? No, it's fleeting again. No, that's lost. Okay, but something else. Maybe I should just finish commenting on depression before moving on to something else. I think it's something that it's difficult to understand from the outside if I don't know someone closely or personally, that I can see this is how a person actually changed from not being in an episode to moving into an episode. And that's, for me, it's fortunate, and that helps a stigma is to have a personal exposure. But the full extent of depression can be a person loses so much energy they can't even get up to go to the bathroom. So that's not laziness. It's losing a life force. I don't know if that's the correct word, but losing energy to that extent. And even a person's the activation of neural pathways in the brain changes so much that it becomes so overly self-critical, hopeless, and it's not someone's ability to choose. There is to an extent and with help, but it's not a once-off choice. I'm going to focus on this or not, because we see it from people. Just be right, man. Of kom met reg, just snap out of it. And it's, I want to say, it's impossible to just do it like that. It's something that it develops over time, and it exists physiologically in your body, in your brain. You can't just snap out of it. Medication can help, therapy can help. Different types for different types of presentations in different individuals, but it's not possible to just snap out of it. And it's actually something that further isolates a person. In my experience of depression, where I'm already alone and isolated, when people that are close to me, that care about me, says things like that, it pushes me further away. It reduces how much they actually understand about me.
And it's again a label, right? It's like making it part of your identity. Like, you are this.
Yes, absolutely. You are this. And then the people lose sight of what else am I apart from this label. Another thing, antisocial personality disorder, labels attached to that. It's things like psychopath or sociopath. Automatically, I don't know, because that's almost one that gets exposed a lot in the media, or that gets a lot of attention, movies and stories. Whereas there's a lot more to antisocial personality disorder. In the DSM, you won't find the words psychopath or sociopath. The personality disorder, when we look at it from a developmental psychological perspective, it's someone that has given up on having people close to me will meet my needs, so I have to meet those needs myself. I have to, whether I hurt or whether I am selfish, I need to look after myself, because it's not going to come from someone else. So it helps to know, I think, at the core personality level, what the need or the function is, to get away from the stigma, or from the stereotype.
I want to, before you go on to the next one, I want to ask a question on that, if it's okay.
Sure.
Because I see this a lot, and I'm curious to hear what you're going to say about this. I see a lot of people who are not qualified psychologists, or maybe they've read some books or something, but that's all, who kind of like diagnose people based on their observation, and I think that's a very dangerous thing. Do you see that happening a lot, and what are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's frustrating, and I know it's common. People do it, and in my own life, people will come to me and say, "Hey, let me tell you about this person. He's such a narcissist, or he's such a narcissist," almost looking for my support to help establish how bad this person actually is. Because I think if I don't know more about the personality, I will use it as a way to justify why this person is a bad person, why my relationship is struggling. And obviously, when I have the explanation, when I read the article online, I will see all those things that I read about. And I'm not saying they're untrue. Some of them might be true. But now what it does is, again, it limits that person to only those traits and not to what else they can possibly be. It doesn't allow me to see actually what the person's at the core level, what their needs are, what the functioning is actually aimed at achieving for them. Whether it's actually emotional closeness, or whether it's to feel enough worth apart from achievement, not attached to any achievement. I will only see the selfish narcissist, and I will not see the real self, behind the ideal self. I won't see the real self that's so inadequate, that's so afraid for criticism, so afraid to fail, which actually, when I see that, can enable much more closeness and a different type of relationships. a different type of relationship. But yeah, I guess I'm concerned that that's something that might continue until people, and not even until people get to know someone closely, because that will keep emotional distance. It will prevent me from learning more about a person if I get stuck at a label like that. I think it will take more. It will take additional intentional effort to see the real self behind the traits that I'm looking like. Kyk vas man, what's that in English now? That I'm
Look
looking
fast.
against.
I remember based on this topic, I was speaking to Dr. Jooste about it as well. And he said to me, if you go look at it statistically, if you look at things like narcissism, histrionic personalities, psychopathy, things like that, he said it's about 3 to 5% of the whole population that are like that, and it's so it's not like a big part of the population, but it feels to me like today it's almost like everybody is like, if somebody is just a little bit off, if somebody is just a little bit excited or just a little bit passionate or whatever, then we have to put a label to this. And I do think that's a very very dangerous thing.
No, absolutely, and it's also a thing that puts all the blame on someone else and takes all the responsibility off me that's putting the label. So I almost want to say it's an indication that I need some introspection, that it can be good for me if I put that label on someone else. Let me take the time and also see, but what are the labels with that same frame of reference, or with that same perspective? What are the labels I can put on myself as well?
You said, what are the labels you can put on yourself?
Yeah, exactly. What's the type of personality or the structure that I can see in myself that's difficult for people around me to cope with?
Wow, that's good. I love that.
Yeah,
what are some of the things in me that might be difficult for other people to cope with? I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what I mean is, if I find myself looking for the label to explain what's difficult about my partner or my family member, let me take the time to see it in myself as well. It's only fair, but it takes a sense of psychological growth. There are some scales we look at to see how much does someone grow psychologically. It depends on the approach now, but one of them is actually that it's seeing my own influence, seeing my own responsibility, going from a stance of pointing outwards to looking inwards.
Beautiful. I love that. Any other thoughts you want to share on those personalities?
Yeah, I think borderline personality, I don't know how much it is in the social media or common talk outside, but I've heard the labels of drama, unstable, emotional, and with that, yeah, that's maybe what a person can see, but in that is actually someone that's alone, someone that's looking for closeness, someone that's actually struggling to experience closeness, even when it's there for them to experience. Yeah, that's just in a nutshell what I could say about borderline.
So, what advice would you give to people who are encountering these personalities? So, say for instance, you encounter somebody with symptoms of borderline, symptoms of antisocial personality. What would you say? How should a person approach that? Is it like a kind of like a more a try of understanding? Should a person try to include the person more? Should a person maybe keep your distance?
Well, okay, I think it is slightly different depending on the context. So I think if it's a person close to me, a loved one, maybe a partner or a spouse, it's okay. I want to say this with carefulness. It's when it gets to that point where you can see the person is struggling to function, not only in my relationship, but maybe with coworkers as well, or with others, is yes, try and support the person to get the appropriate help. It's rarely there's not much to lose. It's not rarely a bad thing. If I can say that, but that's where I want to limit almost to getting help. I think almost more important than that, or the diagnosis, because that's what will enable the person to be more than that label diagnosis. That's what will enable the person to function more effectively. It's not only looking into that and not only getting stuck with that. Yeah, and I think it'll take some deeper understanding to see what the person's needs are that actually develop into the type of behavior that comes through as a personality disorder like that. But if someone is committed enough, it's definitely possible, especially collaborating with a therapist. So I would say, maybe this is a good way to say it. Yes, support someone to go for therapy, but go with them. Don't just send them on their own, because most symptoms, most of them are seen interpersonally, not just intrapersonally, and that interpersonal context needs as much intervention as the individual needs.
And by the interpersonal context, you mean the people around you?
Yes, exactly. So just to make it practical, it's not just to push someone themselves to go for therapy, but let me send someone and let me either go myself or go with them, or let's go as a whole family, because those things need an understanding, need attention, and it can be as important and many times more important than working with the individual himself. I see it practically a lot. Parents would bring children and tell about how horrible and impossible these children are. And then it's like they want the hospital, they want a psychologist to fix a child. But the problems originate, it's interpersonal. So I spend much more time working with parents, and a parent and child together, or a parent to actually see, but this is what my child experiences from me. It's pressure, or it's not enough safety, and that the times that's possible, that parents can actually buy into this, it's much quicker and more effective compared to a person coming to see me once a week and then going back to the same interpersonal context for a whole week.
That's very good. So it's like it's kind of like for that while you're taking them out of the environment that actually might have created it, but then after the hour section, you basically just put them back in that environment that might have created it. But now you say, let's observe the whole environment and see if we can fix the whole environment.
Exactly, absolutely. And it's possible sometimes for working with someone individually for that changing the environment, but it's just more effective to focus on a larger context. And it's not just with parents and children. I really try wherever possible to include even a parent or a spouse, because it affects more. It brings understanding and empathy in most cases. And when that happens, it's more effective change compared to just working individually. So that's what I would say, is to support someone to go for therapy, but go with them.
Very, very good. Johan, thank you so much. This was great. I think your knowledge, I think your insight was so amazing. I'm going to watch this again and take some notes on what you said. So thank you so much for being on our channel. It was so great to make contact with you again.
Yeah, such a pleasure. And I think next time I'll just remember to put a light on you. I see I look like the scum, that guy that's just a silhouette. But yeah, thank you. I enjoyed it. It's always good to talk to you. I appreciate it. Thanks, Albert.
I'm glad you said next time, because I would really love to do this again one day.
Yeah, gladly.
Thank you, Johan. Thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing your input with us.
All right. Thanks, Albert. Okay.
Well, thank you everybody for watching. We are grateful to have had you here. Please remember to like, to subscribe, leave some comments, leave some questions if you want to. And then from Mind Prosperity, we will see you soon again, and we love you. Goodbye.